Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm here to share something completely new with you guys, and it is going to be a book review. So one of my goals after I became self-employed was to read one business book a month. And so I'm going to share with you guys the book that I read in August. I just started a new book, and so I wanted to get this up even though it's Saturday so that I don't forget what I learned in this book, because I think it has been super important and really beneficial for my business. So today we're going to go over the book. I'm going to share the reason why I decided to read this book, what I learned from it, what I disliked. I will have a link down below so you guys can check it out. And I am already starting on my next book. So if you guys seem to like this little review and discussion of this book, I'll probably do another one very soon. I may even finish this book in August. It might make 2 books this month, but that has definitely been a goal of mine. So the book that I decided to read is EntreLeadership by Dave Ramsey. It is no surprise that I am a Dave Ramsey fan. I have been big into Dave Ramsey the last couple of months, especially since I started my business and went completely self-employed. I really do think that being debt-free is really important, especially when it comes to having a business. It just takes all of the stress off of you financially. And so I wanted to read this book for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to read it because I was always inspired when I was listening to Dave's podcast, and he talked a lot about starting his business, like obviously this $1 million business, from the coffee table in his living room. For some reason, the fact that he started his business in his home and has grown it so much has really made me feel connected to him. Like he knows what I'm going through right now. And so I was just really inspired to learn more about what he did and how he grew his business. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to read this book. I also wanted to read this book because in the short term future, I would love to hire an employee, or as Dave calls them, team members. I would love to hire somebody to help out with packing orders and with cutting, and just have someone who is on my team that can help out and give me a little bit more freedom to design and film and all of that. But Dave talks a lot about his book and how he has managed so many people over the years, and so that was the other reason why I really wanted to read this book. So again, I will have this link down below if you guys want to check it out. But here are the things that I liked, disliked about the book. So first off, I really liked that he did a great job of reviewing basic business concepts. So I, of course, as an accountant, MBA, I have my CPA, I know a lot about business, and I have done pretty much every type of business class that you can think of through all of my degrees. And so I've seen a lot of this material before, but I think for someone who doesn't have that business background, it could be really beneficial and definitely something that you need to know. So if you have no business background and you want to start your own business, or you're already starting your business, I really do think this book could be helpful. They talk a lot about a ton of business concepts, accounting concepts. It's very basic, top view type of stuff, but definitely stuff that you should know. And me and Jason have talked a lot about what he's going to do when Mila is a little bit older, and we've thrown around the idea of him possibly opening his own business. And I've told him a couple times while reading this book that he should read this book if that is something that he is really considering, because I really do think that for somebody who does not have a business degree, this will really tell you a lot about what you need to know. So I loved that. I really did love that it went over all of those concepts. But that is also one thing that I did not like about the book, because I personally have gone through all of that schooling. I know a lot of it. A lot of the book was review for me, and so although it's never a bad thing to review concepts, I felt like a lot of it I already knew. So that is one thing that's probably the only downside that I've had to this book. I loved the fact that he had real world examples. Throughout the entire book, he's talking about how he did things, especially in the very beginning of his business. I think that's so beneficial to hear that especially in like what I do with stickers, you really don't get any information from anybody. Nobody wants to share anything. It's very secretive, and I totally understand why, because what stops somebody from going and buying the sticker paper you use, or going to buy this or do that? I totally get why people are so secretive, but it makes it really hard to figure out basic things. Like, I feel like in other businesses, people are more willing to share their vendors and share these tips and tricks. But with sticker businesses, and especially like being online where you could really like have the same customers, it makes it hard. So that is one thing that I really loved. I really think that this book changed my perception of not only my future employees, but also my customers. And I'm really grateful for that. So like I said in the beginning of this video, Dave doesn't call his employees, he calls them team members. And he really does want his team members to feel like they're self-employed, meaning that like if they work harder, they can make more money. Just like the main reason why I pointed out in my like comparison video where I was talking about being self-employed and being an employee, one thing that I really didn't like when I was an accountant was the fact that like I could work really hard and still get paid the same amount. But Dave sets up his compensation program so that if you're working harder, if you're accomplishing these goals, you're gonna get paid more. So I just loved his concepts about that. And it really did change my idea about my future employees or team members. He gives so many ideas about how to compensate, how to recruit people. He talks about his interview tactics. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, and again, Jason was probably so annoyed with me through this whole process because I was literally like, every time I read something really interesting and I'm like, ooh, I like this, I'm gonna like write this down, I would tell him, and he was probably so annoyed. But one thing that he talked about in his book was that the final interview that he would do would be a dinner with the person's spouse or like significant other. And sometimes within that dinner, the spouse would say, I don't think you're right for this job. And so it was kind of like the last thing that could like weed this person out. And I love that idea. I definitely think that when I get to the process of hiring somebody, I'm definitely going to have like a final dinner with them. I'm going to invite like their spouse, significant other, whatever it may be. And I'm gonna make sure Jason's there, because Jason is just as much of a part of my business than Dave's wife was a part of his. I asked Jason a lot about designs. I asked him about like customer relations issues. I asked Jason a lot, and although he doesn't have the business experience, very similar to like how Sharon doesn't have it, I really do think that sometimes you just need to be like outside of the situation so you can have a clear view. So I definitely plan to implement that when I decide to hire somebody. I really do think that like having Jason's perspective on a person's like their overall, you know, character would really help when hiring somebody. I really do trust Jason's opinion. So that is one thing that I definitely plan to incorporate when I plan to hire somebody. Again, a main reason why I wanted to read this book was because he talks a lot about hiring on his podcast and on his YouTube channel. And so when he recommended his book and talked about the fact that like he incorporates a lot of that, I really thought, okay, this is the first book that I need to read throughout my like goal of reading one book. And like I said, he goes into so much. There's so many topics relating to hiring somebody and like maintaining them, when it's time to like fire somebody, when you need to give grace. I really do think that it's really, really beneficial stuff, especially if you plan to ever hire somebody in your business. He, of course, is extreme, like he is with his debt stuff, and I know that he's not for everybody, so I totally understand if you're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to read this book. But one of the things that, like, one of the reasons why he's pretty extreme is he legit says in this book that if an employee, if one of his team members has an affair, that he would fire them. And that's because he says, if your spouse cannot trust you, how am I supposed to trust you? And I never thought of it that way, but it totally makes sense. Of course, I don't think I would ever find out that, you know, one of my team members or employees would cheat. I don't know how you would really find that out unless it's super public, but I never thought of it that way, and I feel like he changed my mind when it comes to like how I think of certain things, which is good. He also, like I said, changed my mind about dealing with customers, and he really makes it seem like they bend over backwards for their customers. And I totally get it. I totally understand why you would want to do that. And so I feel like my mind has changed a little bit about how I've dealt with stuff. I feel like I need to provide the service that I would want, and looking at it that way now means that I'm doing so much more than I ever would have before. And I think that all has to do with Dave Ramsey and what he said in this book. I really do think that he opened my eyes to the fact that like I should be treating my customers exactly the way that I would want to be treated. And trust me, I want a lot. So I totally understand why he thinks that should be the way that you treat them. So like I said, those were some of the reasons why I love this book. It took me less than a month to get through this book. There are, let's see, over 300 pages, just over 300, and he breaks it into a bunch of different chapters. I really do think, again, if you are, you know, working on your business, if you're thinking about opening up a business, if you want just some like basic business tips and tricks, I think this is a really good book for you guys. So again, I will have it linked down below. I personally loved it. If Jason ever decides to open his own business, I'm going to recommend it. I have recommended it to my brother who has started his own business. So I just really do think that it makes a huge impact. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that he really does stress the fact that when you're starting your business, when you're expanding your business, you should do so without debt. And I am 100% for that. I will never go into debt again. Jason and I have made that super clear with cars, with anything. Honestly, if we paid off this house before we end up moving, I honestly feel like it'd be really hard to get another mortgage, because that's how much I don't like debt. But I really do appreciate the fact that he gives you some strategies. He talks a lot about how you can do things right now without putting yourself in a position where you might not succeed. You know, he talks about the fact that people are like, oh, I need this equipment for my business. If I rent it, it's going to cost so much money. And then he gives an example of how one of his friends was in that same exact situation, and the payment, the loan amount for this expensive equipment came due, and his business started to slow down a little bit, and he didn't have the money, and he almost lost his business because of something he thought he needed for his business. So I just really do feel like this is a great real world example of how to handle business situations. I loved it. I definitely recommend it. And let me know if you guys have read this book. What do you think? Also, leave me some leave me some suggestions down below if you guys have any for any business related books. Again, I was a huge fan of this one. I am really open to any business book, but I want to make sure that, like, for the rest of the year especially, I do one book a month. So let me know if you have any good suggestions down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye guys.